Hello, everyone, and welcome to Evolving Enneagram's Interspiritual Podcast. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram, and I'm so excited. We are doing this amazing transformation by type video series, like an interview series of Enneagram professionals, where we're not just talking about like what you teach in the Enneagram, but we're taking a journey into the personal lives, like the why behind your teaching of the Enneagram and your own spiritual journey as well. So I feel super honored and blessed that we have here today Milton Stewart, whom I would like to call Enneagram royalty, kind of, like I mean, he serves on the IEA Global Board. For those new, that's the International Enneagram Association Global Board of Directors. And also Milton is the founder, the head of Kaizen Careers. So there's like business consulting. So I feel like you're very diverse in your skill set here, but also you are like also podcast king. My understanding is that you have Do It for the Gram is your main podcast, but tell me, you also do two others right now, right? I mean, you're involved in like the IEA podcast as well?
Yeah, currently I am involved with the IEA podcast, getting it off the ground, trying to connect globally and provide another resource for people around the world with healthy Enneagram content.
Yeah, amazing. So these are just a few of Milton's gifts. But today, I feel especially blessed that, Milton, you're here and willing to share some of your personal journey with me. I want to say that, I think we first met, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't, like COVID kind of destroyed memory. Like I lost
Ooh.
track of time, right?
Yes, same.
But I think I met you online during COVID. I recall being part of a panel where we
Hmm.
talked about inclusivity on the Enneagram Global Summit hosted by
Yep.
Jessica Dibb of the Shift Network, and so that was that was like into the fire, talking about inclusivity post George Floyd, et
Yes.
cetera. So that's how I got to know you and was just so just impressed. I'm not just by your outer work, but by your authenticity and your depth. And so I've been excited to have an opportunity to get to know you more deeply. And so yeah, for sure. So I'd love to just hear to start, like how you discovered the Enneagram, and then we can bring in spirituality right after that. Yeah, unless it's intertwined. So yeah.
Sounds good. I mean, I guess it's a little intertwined. I was, I don't know, around 15 years ago, 15-ish years ago, I was stuffing my face full of food at our young adult minister's house. We were having a devotional for people who may not know what that is. Um, and we were just talking, kicking back, relaxing, eating, obviously. And he brings out this big blue book and he's like, "Who wants to take a personality test?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it. I like these things. Let's get it." Right. So that the big blue book, if you know the Enneagram space, obviously is the wisdom of the Enneagram.
Yes.
So we take the 2-question test. Um, and I get my letters correct on the first one. And so what he does, he reads off like the couple of first paragraphs for each type, and we're like all in the room. And so the first 2 paragraphs about every type in the book is great. I mean, it's absolutely great. So he's reading the first 2 paragraphs, and I'm sitting there like, "Yes, thank you. About time, somebody," all this type of stuff. But then the second two, the second two after the first two are all the things that people don't see that you probably like your type structure struggles with and people don't see. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." So even though I'm inside, I'm like, "Oh, this is pinpointing me nail on the head." Externally, I'm like, "I don't know about that," like in front of everybody else. I'm like, "I don't know. I have to look into this. I don't know. This might not be accurate, that accurate on these parts," knowing good and well that it was very accurate.
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
right. And so when I left that night, it's one of those things. I think for me as a 7, when anything can pin me down in a sense, that it pins me down, but it actually is extremely stimulating in a way because I'm intrigued.
Mm,
I have to learn more. And
mm,
so I went at the time and got every book I could find on Enneagram and listened to every podcast, which there were like 2 podcasts at that time, which is like a ton now. And then the books, it was nowhere near the amount of books we have now. So I gathered that material and I just started reading and I just started listening and I just started doing, and so I just started learning more. And then I started sharing with other people. And I was mistyping everybody that I knew simply because I had no clue what the Enneagram really was.
Oh
And
my
I was
God.
basing it on their behavior. Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere I went, you're probably a this, you're probably a that, right? Just making a fool out of myself. But um, as I grew and I learned, I worked in education at that time. And I spoke about the Enneagram so much because I really started to learn it. I really started to see the impact it was changing me. It was changing the people who were close to me who had got into it. And I saw how I was able to interact at the school I worked at with the students and the teachers. I had a way of being able to understand them and
Mhm.
connect with them like where other people couldn't. And so the principal, she told me, she said, you talk about this so much, why don't you just like do a summer PD on it, like
Yeah.
for our group? And I was like, oh, okay, sure, this is great, I love to do this, right? So I did that, added way too much information to my PowerPoint, like a 7 would do, so much information, like, but they need to know this, but they need to know that, what about this, what about this, all that stuff. It was a great time nevertheless, and I did that for multiple years for the school. um, as I started to kind of grow outside of the role I was at the school, eventually it turned into me looking for a career coach. Eventually, I wanted to do career coaching and just add in the Enneagram. I talked about the Enneagram so much. Once again, a good friend of mine said, why don't you be an Enneagram coach? And I was like, that exists? He was like, I think so. And so I Googled it. It was real, made contact with an amazing mentor that I still do work with to this day. And yeah, that's the budding story of how the Enneagram found me and I found it.
Yeah. What an amazing story. What year was that this happened?
Yeah. Ooh,
Approximately.
2000 and let me see. I want to say about 15 years, probably 2000.
Mhm.
I would say 12 through 15, somewhere in there.
Mhm. Yeah,
2012.
time's fuzzy for me as well, but just a general ballpark. I mean, you've been doing this for a while,
Yeah.
is my point. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, because the Enneagram is very popular in our modern day, and there are folks who, yeah, meet the Enneagram and then turn around, the next Monday, like meet the Enneagram on
True.
Friday and turn around on Monday and teach it, right? And so you're doing this. Actually, a lot of people have 7s. So
Unfortunately, it is true. But yes, that is
I
happening.
got this, you know.
I
Yeah.
read a book. I know it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I want to go all the way back to that point. If you're
Okay.
to whatever you're willing to share about, like, okay, the first 2 paragraphs, I love this because it's almost like a clue how to teach the Enneagram to 7s. Like, tell them the 2 paragraphs of good things,
Yep.
once there's some buy-in there, kind of like, then you seed or you insert some of these, like, like incisive
Mhm.
pieces of their, like, inner lives, right? I
Yeah.
would love to hear if you can recall anything specific about that you're like, oh my God, I do that.
Yeah. Something that just comes up for me, and it's from that time. It wasn't very specific, but it was from that time. It was the book, I believe, or somewhere that I was reading, we talked about, it said how 7s can be shallow.
Mm,
And the first inclination is like, no, I'm not, all ego defensive. I am not shallow. But one, we have to look at a different definition of the word shallow on one sense. But in the other sense, you have to look at, in what ways am I shallow?
mm,
Right?
mhm,
So in the first form, it was the reason as a 7 I tend to be shallow is because I am doing a little bit of everything, but I am not going deep in anything necessarily. I'm here, I'm there, I'm here, I'm there, I'm here, I'm there. And you know what I'm saying? I'm sampling a little bit of everything, but not really going in depth in any of those things, right? So I had to be like, well, that is definitely a degree of shallowness, right? And then even with the whole idea of friends and relationships, you know, it's really hard to go real deep when you have a gazillion friends that you're like, I'm spending time. It's like real hard to go deep, right? And so like it is shallow, in that sense. It's not necessarily a conscious shallow where it's like I'm being shallow to, for some negative purpose per se, but because of the typical behavior of a 7, I am shallow in ways that I had to constantly and still work on, where it's like, how do I go in depth? And I have to choose, which we love options,
Yes.
right? The ability to have options makes us shallow as well, because I'm looking to have all these options, but I'm not choosing truly what I want to do, or I'm not being present enough to know what I'm being called or led to do.
Oh, wow. So what you just made me think of is that, so I've done partner dancing in my life. And as
Yes.
you, like for those who are just on audio, you got to watch the video to watch us dancing here. No, but like, so one of the things I've learned is if you step and then you plant both feet, right? Like, and you land solidly on the ground, it takes longer to take the next step. So actually, when you partner dance, you don't ever really land. You stay on your toes. And as you were talking, I was like, 7s inhabit, stay on their toes so they can make the next move quickly. Like if you never land onto your heel, like that's hard to get up from the heel, but it's
Right.
grounded. It's grounded to be on your heels. Like it's a staying power. It's and it's going to take me a little bit extra energy to get up from this place. And
Sure.
who knows, this place could be painful,
Right.
limiting, all that. And so that being on your toes to take the next step quickly, feels very 7-ish in habit, right?
Love that analogy. Love
Yeah,
it. Love
yeah.
that analogy.
It's just
Gosh, that's good.
what came up as you
That's
were
really
talking,
good. That's really good.
So yeah, you could do that. But then, so what the thing that I think that people don't necessarily, because on the surface, 7s can have that, like, oh, yeah, fun, and that if we know about the type and understand that there is a fear beneath the flightiness,
Oh yeah.
that like,
Oh
I'd
yeah.
love to hear first a little bit about what the fear that you came to confront when you stopped being as flighty, if you will, surface in your
Right.
description. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So many layers of fear. It's been fascinating to learn how much fear I actually operate with. Uh, and it's been interesting to work through quite a bit of it. So when it comes to different forms of fear, when I first found it, it was this fear of being trapped in a sense, like when making a choice. It's just, and I actually think that's really a surface fear to a degree. It's way more beneath that. But on the surface, when I first met fear, it was this ability to um, try to navigate from anything that felt as if it would keep me in place, keep me still, and keep me trapped. But because it's connected to things that are uncomfortable, aka mainly emotions and bodily sensations. And so that's what was the area where I was like, oh wow, like this is happening. And so one of the first times I really like noticed just how much fear my body carries. So long story short, because I'm gonna connect to it, it's the second part of the story is more important than the first. But I was in IEA conference, matter of fact, years ago, right before the pandemic, and we were in this cold room, and we had to meditate in and down with like Helen Palmer and Marianne Gilbert. It was a crazy situation. Helen Palmer was kind of like taking over the situation, though. It was supposed to be like a co-facilitator thing, but we ended up meditating for like, I don't know, almost an hour, going in and down in this cold room. I am in that thing like, I've got to get out of here. But it's really strange because everyone in this room is doing this, and I'm in this room like listening. I've already chose. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm with a friend. So I do this meditation. So it's like a forced meditation, but something shifted in me, and I noticed in an event afterwards that happened that was crazy. We could probably discuss that later. But what happened is, so when I found this shift happen in my body, when I was working in the school, I had like a 30-minute drive to work. So on that 30-minute drive, I said, well, I'm gonna do this in and down breathing, right? Because I noticed a shift when I was in Oakland, doing it. And so what I realized, because I started to become really aware, is that after about 15 to 20 minutes, I felt my body release. Like I actually felt a release in my body. And
Wow.
I was like, oh my goodness. So I had noticed that fear had made me clench my
Wow.
body in a way that was pretty, what I would consider, unfortunately, normal, where it was like, that's just how I operate, right?
Yeah.
And what I noticed is that when I worked at the school, I would enter it with a whole different way the days I did my in and down breathing
Mm,
for an extended period of time.
mm,
Because my body, even though I was at a school, the kids love me, I love them, everything, my body still had fear. So it was a part of me that was hold tight, right? And so how I interacted, how I did things, wasn't able to get to my heart necessarily. I conceptually and mentally, intellectually would connect, but I wasn't there with my heart, you know what I'm saying? Even though, you might do
yeah.
nice things. So I
Right.
wasn't even there. So me confronting fear found that I had so much fear in my body. And on top of that, I had so much fear and pain that I had not dealt with, because my tendency to make everything okay,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Make everything like, oh, it's fine, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? It took me a while to realize that.
Yeah.
um, I started to realize, like, oh my goodness,
Mm,
you have so much fear, so much pain, so much trauma, so much hurt,
wow.
um, that is unprocessed,
Mm,
because the ego has said, no, 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 you have to be okay, bro. You got to keep moving, make it happy, distract, go do some fun, be stimulated, go, boom. So, realizing that was a heavy realization. I've always wanted to be,
mm,
it was instilled in me from my mom, but it was always to, whatever I do my best at it, whatever that is.
mm,
And so I always had this yearning to be better, to grow, to improve. That's always been a thing internally, for me. And so when I noticed that, I was like, wow, like my personality, my ego is afraid of being trapped in these emotions, so it avoids them. But honestly, that's the trap.
yes.
And I was like, one thing I really dislike is being trapped. And so I said, I gonna have to do this work to not be trapped. So I
Oh,
need to feel this fear. I
wow.
need to come to grips. I need to face it. Um, and I need to allow myself to be honest about it. So those things really hit me deep. Um,
Yeah.
and fear led me to all my other emotions. When I wouldn't say got a hold of fear, but when I really recognized that, like, dude, that's fear. Now the other floodgate of wonderful emotions that don't seem comfortable start coming forth. Yeah.
Wow. What a profound journey. I mean, you named an insight that to me, it opens the floodgates, right? And like literally of like, but of your humanity,
Right.
that I think sevens, steeped in type, it's like they skim over the surface of the water rather than plunge the depths of like the possibilities. And it is like this exploration of a totally new terrain that you didn't
Yeah.
even realize you had kept yourself from, that enriches your life.
Yep.
But the difficult news, as you found, is that the first layer of it is like, oh, like these are the
It's
negative emotions, because those are the ones like I wasn't facing. Right? like,
right. It's
like,
like, this is dumb. What are we doing this for?
oh, why would you want that? And that's what a lot of sevens like. They start out with this, like, why would you? But why is this a good thing to embrace your negative
Yep.
emotions? So I love that you shared, like if only to model for other sevens who are listening to this, that like there's hope. And the idea is that, so yes, I did say uh, that in a way it squashes your negative emotions. But what I found working with sevens is it is like that, the depth of emotion, the depth of feeling, and therefore the depth of satisfaction and enjoyment also lie there in that same terrain, right?
Yep.
Because it's almost like you couldn't stay long enough to feel even the richness of that joy until you could stay,
Yep.
right? Yeah, yeah. And I love how you describe, because I think for sevens who are just like, oh yeah, just let it go or whatever, like it's hard to describe to the head type other than through
Yep.
this bodily description that you offer.
Yes.
That is the difference between constriction and release, right? Like
Yep.
that, but you don't even know you're constricted And until like you're willing to first do that work. And I want to name that Milton described for those of you again listening who are newer. Helen Palmer is one of the preeminent teachers of the Enneagram, and one of my first teachers. And this breathing exercise, a breathe in and down is like iconic, right, within the Enneagram
Yep.
movement. But it is like in and down and following the breath in and down into our bodies. This groundedness that can create. So for you, Milton, recognizing fear beneath everything, I wonder now about your spiritual journey, and how it kind of mingles with this. I mean, because when I think of fear, coming from my spiritual perspective, the next thing I think of is faith, right? And so faith in what? Right? What gives the faith to follow the journey? And so I'm curious
Yeah.
about your journey of faith. Yeah.
Oh, this is a big, broad question here. So growing up, off and on went to church. My mom took me off and on, and she really wanted me to have a spiritual background and a spiritual foundation. Because she believed it was just very important for me to have something to lean on when times get tough, and so she would take me to church. Eventually we became members, and I went to a very interesting church, where we were pretty diverse for our area. I'm in the South of America, the United States, and churches can have a big reputation for being a certain way down here, whereas homogenous and only look one way and have a lot of these hardcore rules. But I went to a church that was actually mixed with Black, white, and Latino people, and so my church experience wasn't the same as a lot of some of my friends who were in the same like church or denomination or whatever, who end up coming to my church. It was more thoughtful, more integrated, and we had people from different perspectives, like easily. So like in America, we literally got Democrats and Republicans, quote unquote, in the church, and there's not a problem. So I grew up in a very interesting dynamic in that way, which I realize most people don't. And so I didn't have the typical church trauma, thank God, because I know a lot of people who do, unfortunately. But so I didn't really grow up with that type of church trauma or those hardcore rules. The thing was, I always was searching for, before I knew I was 7, I was always searching for wisdom. So when I'm sitting in the pew and I don't know what this man up here talking about, or what he talking about is boring because he ain't really hitting it on the nail on the head. No disrespect, just saying my young perspective.
Yeah.
I open the Bible if I'm not like laughing with my friends in the front, acting silly, and about to get caught. But I'm looking up Proverbs. I'm reading Proverbs the whole time because I'm like looking at wisdom, because it's making my outer world make sense, and it's making things that maybe I've come up with or experienced but never had the language for. And I'm like, oh, so it's always been this sense of seeking some type of wisdom. So that was one of the things. And before I was like baptized, I got into I got into a fight with a guy in middle school, and we fought, like we played football, and so I was getting serious about my faith at that age, in a sense, but I was still a middle schooler boy acting a fool. But anyway, so we got early in the year, we had gotten into a fight or whatever, and little to say, I kind of won the fight basically. Now this second fight though, it was like, I don't know, we were roughhousing, playing, a couple of us, and like I think he like had me in a headlock, and I hit my head, like he kind of pushed my head kind of on like the side of a door, and so then I just punched him, and then all of a sudden, yeah, I know, total Milton move here, old Milton, young Milton, total, I punched him, and then after that, there was something, I would say honestly divine, that happened, because I could not, I didn't punch back, I didn't fight back, I did nothing. Like it was crazy. And so I was just getting hit, and it was very fascinating, right? I was getting hit. I I had like my nose was bloody, all this type of stuff, and I was just, it was like just like I there was nothing for me to. It was like nothing there,
Uh-huh.
like it was like nothing there for me, and I think there used to be. I used to hold on to this egoic way of maybe being maybe stronger or faster or more athletic or something I was holding on to as a kid. And that second fight changed all of that. Right. I told people I ran into a wall outside. Like I was running and I just ran into a wall, but I didn't. I got into a fight and I just didn't fight back. Like I punched him and didn't fight back. And so the next day, and it was crazy. The next day, we had a PE class together and we were the most athletic. So they put us against each other. Now, usually, if you were in a fight and you lost, the next day you would have like fear or you would be scared or you would feel your images look bad or something. I had none of that. I felt free. It was crazy. And we played soccer and I defeated him.
Wow.
Um yeah, but it was like I had none of that. Now my one punch did kind of cause a slight scar on his lip. My one punch. I just want my ego want to flex a little bit real quick. But what I'm saying, he's a great guy. But what I'm saying, uh, something divine happened that it shifted me to not keep going down that road because I
Mm,
needed I needed a humbling moment, and that was a really good humbling moment. But it
mm,
was a spiritual thing too, because right after that I was very serious. I got baptized. I was humbled in a way. It just moved and changed me. And I
mm,
shifted in some ways that I still am not fully articulating to this day. I'm still working through. But long story short, I'm
mm,
athletic in high school, popular, but I mean I go to church. I'm a regular, kid. I'm a little different because I don't go to parties and all that type of stuff. And I kind of keep to myself, even though I am athletic and people know me and all this type of stuff, whatever. But I was still different than other people in a lot of those ways where I didn't always just go with the crowd type of thing. I really did think for myself, and that product of mom for sure. 'Cause she was like, think for yourself, think for yourself. I'm like, all right, but I really do. I really did. Um, and so that leads up to me going to college, me going to a Christian university, and I disagree with a lot of things that they stood for, and even to this day, I don't necessarily agree with some of the ways and different things that they do and stuff like that. Not against them, not casting them down, none of that type of stuff. But even while I was there, there were quite a few things that I just disagree with in a lot of ways. Why did I go there? Because that's probably a question people ask. But I found people who genuinely cared about me, right? I wanted to go somewhere where people, one, didn't really know me, and I wanted a new experience. But I found people in a summer program beforehand that people genuinely cared about me, like
mm.
genuinely cared. And
Wow.
like some people who really had faith and like really had God,
Uh-huh.
rather we saw some things different.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, okay, okay. So by being there, it really defined and refined more of my own faith, right? It really did in a lot of different ways. Like I learned a whole lot about myself, and about other people, how to lead, all kind of stuff. So that being a part of my walk, I left there, tried to work in finance. That wasn't for me. That is way too stringent rules, all kind of stuff.
Well,
I
what
did a
did
little
you
bit of a
major in? I don't even know.
oh, good question. Eventually, I mean, I started off majoring in electrical engineering because I
Oh,
love tinkering. I love working with stuff, right? I
yeah.
love that stuff. But then I hit calculus too, and it changed my whole like outlook on life. When I was like, oh, maybe this is not for me. And then we had a lab. I just want to say that before I say the first word, a math lab where you learn math. And I know I gotta clarify.
The May.
Uh, I mean, where we learn math, and they were in there talking like the engineers and math majors, and I did not fit in at all. They were doing jokes and everybody was laughing, but me, I was like, that is not funny.
Mm,
Like, so it was just not for me. And so I switched to business finance, and that had a greater purpose to it. Like, I always had like a business acumen to me, but I also wanted to teach finance to like people in my community and understand how the financial system really worked. So that was kind of the angle I took.
mm,
Um, Started off in a bank. um, I ended up being really good at what I was doing, but I did not like it at all. I don't like trying to. offer people stuff that they don't need that could financially hurt them. Not cool with me. And then also, it's hard when I'm young to work under a leader who don't know how to lead. Because my, I'm gonna say some stuff that I think I questioned my first boss. I said, what's your leadership strategy, or like, how do you lead? He was like, I lead like a lion. I was like, oh, that's all you have to say. Cool, gives me all I need to know. Right, this young me. Um, but in all of that, like staying close to my faith is something that's always serious. I was a counselor at like a camp in the summer, really trying to get kids to know things. One thing that was always interesting though is that I was never about completely the guidelines. I'm a 7, right? So like the hard lines, those things never really work for me, right? Even when I even when I would read something, maybe in the Bible, and I'd be like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it was experiential, even though I didn't know at the time. A lot of my connection to God was experiential, and I didn't realize that, because we're just not taught it a lot of times.
Mhm.
So fast forward, working with the Enneagram, I'm doing these retreats with different teachers. I'm doing my own presence practice, and you start to experience stuff. You be like, whoa,
Wow.
something's happening here, right?
Yeah.
And through it, I found this deep yearning. Like I found this really, really deep yearning
Mhm.
to want to not only grow closer, like to the divine, to God,
Mhm.
but this deep yearning to learn more, to question more, to be more curious, to allow myself to sit more in mystery because we don't know enough. So that humbles me more, right? But it also frees me, it liberates me in a way that I, you know, I can't say that I've found before. And that is, it is something that, like, I would say my spirit thirsts and quenches for real. Like, I
Mhm.
got to learn more. I got to figure out. I got to question, right? All these things. And, for the longest time, it was conceptual. Like, and I love you said that earlier. You talked about in our heads. I thought about a lot of different things, questioned a lot of different things, but, you know, I didn't really, some things I experienced, but recently I went on a trip
Mhm.
and I experienced a lot of these things, which has been huge for me on my spiritual journey.
Wow.
Um, and it's transformed and transforming me in a way that I cannot fully articulate a lot of times, unfortunately. I wish I could. But the pieces are coming together.
Amazing. Yeah, I would love to kind of go deeper into an exploration of that trip that you just took. I just want to kind of reflect back a few of the things that I think, like I heard you say in your sharing, that feel profound to me. Well, first of all, I mean, it sounds to me like, I mean, that wisdom, like you have a wisdom path that there's something integral about that in your life, that you were born with this. So even having the 7 type structure that like is a bit flightier, right? That kind of skims the surface. There is a larger, I would say, or core part of you that yearned even from the outset for something of substance,
Hmm.
right? An experience of substance. But you were going to enter into that experience first initially through ideas that made sense to you, right? So the spirituality and these religious teachings are like, no, if you're like no to the thought, you're not going to
Yep.
go into the experience, more. And I apologize for
True.
the background here. But once you heard, like say, the Enneagram, right? And there are these teachings, I feel like it's appropriate that there are sirens in the background right now, if you can hear them.
Perfect.
Oh, you like the
Very faint.
alarms
Very faint.
and the fear that arises, where you recognize that, how did you run from wisdom is what I heard. How did you yearn for it and yet run from it? One of my favorite quotations from actually what I call a wisdom tradition, which is A Course in Miracles, says the ego's mantra is seek, but do not find. And that notion of seeking in the outer, seeking, in the outer when it's only in the inner,
Hmm.
right? When what you'll find is actually in and down, in and down. right? And so
Yeah.
recognizing the ways like, oh, my Enneagram type does that. And it's a strategy. And actually the strategy has quite worked for me. I'm pretty popular, like, and yet it didn't work because
Yeah.
something that I really yearned for, this wisdom, wasn't available there at that level of being. And so that's what I hear in your journey, this earnest quest for substance, right? Even in
Hmm.
the people, like even choosing like a caring environment, right? Like feels like part of that journey of like, what will actually nourish me? There's a part of me that is deeply, deeply drawn toward real quenching of this thirst I have in life, right? So with that, I want to invite you to share, any reflections you have, but also sharing about your trip. Yeah.
Yeah, so brings up two different things for me, as my brain usually does. So one of the things that you brought up that I think is so important to mention is about seeking and finding. Um, and at the end, I'll share a quote that's about that. But I found in my life, and I keep finding this, but I find it difficult to work with,
Mm.
that the more I go seeking for stuff, the less I'm able to find the things I really need. um, and that's the seeking um, external stuff,
Yeah.
trying to overcreate stuff, trying to overplan stuff as a seven.
Mm.
Um, I found that it doesn't work for me. Like, I have created and tried so many different things in my life. Say, maybe you want to make more money, or maybe you want to get more in this organization, or maybe you want to travel more and do this stuff. And there's been so many moments where I have tried to follow the steps of some people who've done it and did a great job, and I have the energy for it and excitement, but it don't work for me.
Mm.
And I had to realize it, because you keep start trying new stuff, and then I'm like, Milton, I don't think that's for you. You had to talk to yourself, be like, look, Milton,
Milton.
I know you got excited because you saw what they did, and they're doing seem to be doing fine and great with whatever that is, but that's not for you. Something else is for you, and you don't need to be seeking out that type of stuff. And it's like, oh my goodness. And so this has really happened this year, especially since I got back from my trip to Egypt, which I'll talk about in a moment.
Mm.
Is that when I allow myself to be present, I keep my hand and my energy and my presence to the things I already have going, and so I work through them. I work through completing them. I work through connecting with people. Work on myself. All of a sudden, opportunities and different things start to find me, and I'm like, "What is this?"
Oh,
I'm, and I
oh,
mean, this has been a pattern for years,
wow.
and it's been a pattern for years, and it's still hard for me to grasp it because it feels so counter to my ego of going
Mm.
out and seeking and then getting stimulated and adventuring and doing all this stuff to create what I want, to try to create my own future, my own. And the more I do that, the less return I have. That's not, it's like, ugh. But the more I sit back, do my work, inner work, rest, connect, put my hand to whatever that I'm doing, all of a sudden opportunities come out of the woodworks, like
Mm.
from places that like I never planted a seed or never. I'm like,
Wow.
okay, all right, I hear you. I hear you, God. I see you, holy ideas. I see what's happening here. I see it happening, and
Oh.
I'm doing my best to get out the way, get my ego out the way, so they can continue to happen. But
Mm.
it is not easy, you
Mm.
know.
Mm.
So that has been very recent work that's been going on for a while for me, of really catching the bigger patterns, right? It's like we catch these small patterns when we see our type structure, but there's bigger patterns within them, and those are the ones where it's like, you and I've been doing this work, you sit down, you're like, oh my goodness, I did not see that pattern, that's a big one, right? And then it takes you to another place. You're like, okay, well, all right, we're gonna have to do a little bit more work in this area. Oh my goodness, I didn't see that magnitude of the pattern hit me, right?
Mm.
So, you know, that's a whole nother level of work that I've been doing. And that's all really come together more completely from my experience of going to Egypt,
Mm.
and with Russ Hudson and Denise Hoke and a team of other people, about 20 something of us. And this trip, even though we're all Enneagram practitioners or love the Enneagram or know the Enneagram and our types.
Mm,
It wasn't purely about the Enneagram, it's about the work we do. And it's about the consciousness, the level of consciousness, which connects to our level of spirituality as well. There's a connection. And
mm,
so it's also about collective consciousness. When you talk about ancient Egypt,
mm,
and all of the things that they were able to do because they had collective consciousness
mm.
together, it's just profound.
Wow.
And to feel the energy and to be in the places where so many different spiritual things, where so much history is that we still don't know about, like there's so much we don't know about, and to rest in the mystery and in the embodiment of the spiritual presence of years, thousands and thousands of years ago. Oh my goodness. I like the things I learned in my head are great, and I can't even remember probably 90% of the stuff that we were taught. Russ and Denise have so much to teach us, and
Right.
there's so much to learn while being there. But it wasn't just about that.
Yeah.
It was about the experience. And for me, the experience was similar to when Malcolm X went to Mecca. To
Mm.
me, that was my experience going to Egypt because
Wow.
it's transformed me. Like it's hit me in ways
Oh my God.
like whoo. So I mean, it like it like rocks the foundation that you were taught in a lot of ways,
Mm,
but then it allows me to fill in those parts of my foundation with things that are truly about real faith,
mm.
like a truly. So before I went over there, here's some of the biggest things. Before I went over there, conceptually, I already had in my head that God is bigger than Christianity. Like that was already a concept in my head. I was like, gotta be, like literally historically gotta be, whether you are whatever faith you is, like gotta be.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, but it was conceptual,
Uh,
right? But to go over there and to meet people who are Muslims and to have conversations and talk to people who know God, and I'm like, oh, you know God, like I know God, you know God. Ooh, we talking God language, spiritual language here. Okay, then
right.
you experience on a whole different level, and so it's like, oh, okay. And
Wow.
then as I'm continuously learning those things, I'm like, it's opening new doors, it's opening new connections, right? And it's also making me, when I come back to the U.S., a little bit weirder.
So,
Just just to be
yes.
honest,
Yeah.
because in many circles, or
Yeah.
Christian circles,
Yes.
I can't really share this like this. I still try to find ways to help people be liberated, from type structure and things that are, closing them in. But, that's a whole tricky thing that has been a work in progress like never before. But nevertheless, it transformed me, and it challenged me in many levels. It challenged my 7’s being there, and it challenged my self-presness being there
Hmm.
because we were in a group,
Yeah.
and so I couldn't be about just me.
Uh,
And so I had to, I kind of call it surrender my self-pres. I had to
uh,
surrender it for the group.
wow.
And what I realized when I surrendered my self-pres for the group, I was honored by the group because I was doing so much. I was looking out for the group. And so it was like people were honoring me because I had did that.
Wow.
So all of my self-pres needs were, guess what, taken care of
Mm.
because I honored the group that we were part
Wow.
of, right?
What a
Yes.
healing. Oh,
Oh
just,
my goodness.
oh my
And
God.
right. So instead of being my own 7’s and self-prayer, it's like
Uh,
I do what I want when I want, how I want, however I want to do, like all that stuff. When I took a day, well, I was saying took a day, I took a couple of hours a night, and I surrendered and I whined. I did all this stuff. I had to go through all these phases. I whined, I cursed, I cried, all this type of stuff. And I was like, you got to lay that down if you want to be with this group for the rest of these 20 days. If it's gonna work, and if you're gonna do the work, because that was my work. Everybody's work is a little different, but my work was to let's submit let's surrender self-praise and let's submit to my social instinct, and let's really be conscious of what my 7’s is doing, because it's not just about me.
mm,
um and so that has been spiritually transforming me in ways that I see people, the way I see humanity, the way I see myself. God, I would say God is bigger, but God is just God infinitely bigger. Even in my own experience, even though I conceptually was bigger, I experienced him in such a broader way, um, that is profound, and words can't fully explain what I'm saying,
Wow.
and what I experience. But that's been a huge part of my spiritual um, journey. It's been big. It's been huge.
Wow. Well, I just want to start by saying how, I mean, I feel this like joy just coming up from my gut as I'm listening to you, joy like for you and like the healing that I don't know why the word healing just keeps coming up for me around your sharing, but this healing for you on multiple levels that I've heard here today. One is the you know, oftentimes sevens get labeled as selfish, right? Because they are I would say self-referencing is, the term, right? So like, because there's this deep belief, fear that nourishment isn't just coming for me. Like I have to go out and get it. And when I have historically taught the seven, I had this child climbing out of the crib, like I want to go get it. Like it's not coming. I mean, they're just sit there and cry, right? The
Right.
symbolism of that. And for you to describe what has been happening in your career, the shift to me, like I heard that actually nourishment can come to me, that I can stay here, that I don't have to hustle all the time and be
Mhm.
anticipating what my next needs might be, right, in my career or otherwise. And I can stay and I can trust the divine to offer nourishment for my journey. That's
Mhm.
profound, right? And so that shift of like being more relational, right, because that is like that's what creates that fierce sort of independence of the night of the sevens, that like I gotta go get it, I gotta think about, because who is if I don't, right? And so this sense of like, hey, well, the freaking universe is thinking about you, the whole universe
Mhm.
is here for you, right? And then related to that, I mean, setting down, I love that you even named, we didn't talk a lot about subtypes yet, but my understanding is that your instinctual stacking is like self-preservation, social, and sexual. Is that right? Or okay.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. And so, I mean, I heard it even in your opening story about like when you're there and you first learned the Enneagram, you're like, and I was sitting there eating too much. I was like thinking, I don't even put that in my story because like I'm self-pres blind. I don't talk about you. It's just, I was just like, this is so fascinating to hear. Like that's your
Yep.
part of your story, right? Like the glutton, related to very self-pres things. And for your self-preservation, for what your ego thinks it needs the most is me,
Mhm.
and like self-preservation is especially me, my well-being. If I don't have this first, nothing can happen, is the fear belief of your egoic structure. And to
Yeah.
have been in a place where you were invited to either surrender it or go home, almost like is what it sounds like, you know, but to spiritually surrender it and then have that sense of connection, and I would say nourishment through like heart connection
Mhm.
around other people. Like
Yep.
what a gift, but a gift that you were available for, that you were open to, right? Is
Mhm.
profound. And it's just so hopeful to me, and that reminds me that I would love for you to share. I mean, I'm sure there are many things that you could share of words of advice for the young seven, like on the journey. But if you could share, like, what words of counsel would you offer to open to that, you know?
Um, I would say for a young seven on the journey, one thing that I would say is one, explore the fear that you do have. We are really good at rationalizing stuff, aka flipping whatever it is to something positive or okay or escaping out of it. It can look those different ways, but I really encourage you to find out what areas that you have fear. It's one of the things, is because that's going to unlock a lot of other stuff. We know sadness is also a struggle for the type 7. uh, Anger usually can be a struggle as well sometimes. But fear is usually the first place that I would say. So get an emotion wheel, and start tracking your fear throughout the day. And a lot of times your fear may be even connected to your stimulation. So your ability to be overstimulated is actually not healthy.
Mm.
And it took me a while to realize that, because it seems, like that's the thing, like, oh, I'm overstimulated, I'm good, like I'm excited about this, or I can create this and build this or go join this or go do this thing. But the overstimulation, when you recognize that and try to breathe for a second and just calm yourself down, even though it may be exciting, overstimulation is not good as being understimulated. And so we want a healthy balance. And so just noticing when stimulation is leading whatever you do next or whatever you're doing, because that's going to be important. So recognize the fear, start just tracking your fear, figure out what it is. And it may feel weird, it may feel not like fear at the beginning, but then you're like, oh my goodness. And then you'll start to recognize what's this overstimulation, because it's connected to fear and anxiety as well, and anxiousness and all of that. So just really just take your time and just notice those two things, and it'll help you start to get in and do the work, because eventually you're going to find out that our ability to escape from the problem or to make light of a situation or to make people laugh or distract or avoid or whatever, those things are actually the trap. And the things that we're afraid to go into is the path for us to have freedom and to not be addicted to stuff. So I really encourage you to do that, because it's important. I'm really hard on sevens. Like in my workshops, like I'm actually pretty hard on sevens because they get away with stuff. Like we're good at it. Like we're
Yeah,
good at getting away. And so
slippery.
yes. So I'm pretty hard on sevens when I do presentations in places, and like it's like I pin them down. They're like, oh my goodness. But then they felt seen,
Oh,
right? And they feel safe and they feel heard. So now they're curious. And so
yes.
now we can talk for real. So
Mm.
it's good. Yeah.
Oh, so amazing. I could talk to you forever, but I would love to hear if you have any closing words or a sentiment, something that's inspired you that you'd like to pass along.
Yes, I have this. Um, Robert Holden presented something um, at a conference, and I'd like to share just a piece of it, and it's for sevens, but everyone can think of this.
Mm,
Only the loving find love, and they never have to seek for it. If we're not careful, searching can become a form of blindness. There comes a point where we are willing to give up searching for seeing. I mean, really being able to see and to see what's right before us. Our destiny is to not to find love, but it is to be the most loving person we can be. And so I wanted to share that because I think it hits the heart of what's happening with a seven, even though we're all in our head. This seeking for stimulation, connection, to be unconditionally loved and taken care of is a deep seeking for sevens through all of this constant stimulation and venturing. But if we can learn to cultivate the love and find it in ourselves, oh
mm.
my goodness, love will find us in ways we've never known. So I just wanted to share that.
So amazing, profound, beautiful. I hear in your story, again, this journey from fear and honoring fear to an embodied faith, like a living,
Mm.
a relational faith, right? The lonely fear and the relational faith. But in this last piece, there's also this powerful movement around, um, I don't know, love, love as something. Oh, here it is. It's the difference between being a truth or a wisdom seeker and a wisdom finder,
Mm.
you know, from seeking to
Yeah,
finding, and finding
yeah.
in wisdom all the things like love. That's what I, and so wow,
Mm-hmm.
thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. Again, I'd love to
Thank you.
go deeper and more, but how about, the sevens virtue of like uh sobriety, which says this is enough, right?
Yep.
Like to me, to be sober, to have enough, not more, but just enough, and have this
Mm-hmm.
moment be enough. So thank you so much, Milton. I'm so grateful for our conversation and for the opportunity to get to know you better and to bless the larger community with your wisdom words, so, and
Yeah.
presence. So thank you. All right,
Thank you as well.
everyone, stay tuned for our next episode.